Narcissism and codependence are two sides of the same coin. Most of us can express traits of narcissism and codependence at different times in our lives and in different relationships, especially when we're under stress. Now, narcissism and codependence are what I call diseases of responsibility, both of them. The narcissist will take too little responsibility, and the codependent person takes way too much. And in a healthy system, responsibility is well aligned with responsibility so that adaptive action can be taken. Um, when the ability to respond is decoupled from responsibility, people basically start to get disabled. This is very clearly visible in a relationship between, let's say, for example, a drug addict and their enabler. The codependent enabler will try to get the drug addict to stop using, while the addict, who has the power to stop, is happy to abdicate the responsibility of doing so at all and rely on the codependent enabler, and the result is disability. Um, the resources and patience of the addict's partner basically increasingly deplete over time while the addict slowly dies, and the couple will spiral into hopeless despair together. It takes two to tango. Um, just as it takes two people to have a healthy relationship, it also takes two people to have a dysfunctional one. It's easy to complain about a narcissistic partner without owning the part of dysfunction that enables them. Now, I've stuck around many times when I should have left, and a benefit of not leaving is that I get to tell you some weird stories about what happened next. Um, it's harder to see the non-abuser as, the victim as dysfunctional. We want to jump in and save them from the perpetrator. The polarization of the system pulls into the third role, which is the savior. That pulls us into the third role. The reality is that in a relationship between two consenting adults, the responsibility for continued dysfunction is pretty much shared between both people. And with that said, uh, here are some examples of things that happen when you're in a relationship with a narcissist. One of them is I didn't know what I knew. I knew nothing. Apparently, everything that I did know, I didn't know. Um, like, example was, I with my second narcissist, I gave him, my number at work, and I told him to call me. And he was basically like, all right, I'll call you. And then, you know, he texted me and was freaking out, saying that, the line's not working and I must not really be at work. Um, and, when he texted me the number, I was like, no, that's not my number. Here it is. And he got really upset and was like, that's not your real work number. The one I called is. Um, and then I was pretty much like, have you even ever called my job? Because I don't remember you ever calling me once. And he was basically like, no, but I know for a fact that this is the number. Uh, like, what? I said, how do you know that? And basically the response was a very bland and straightforward. I just do, and I know you're full of shit. Um, the ultimate knowledge of reality lies with the narcissist. And what I mean is they have to create and maintain a model of the world that pleases them. They'll basically assert this reality onto the codependent and other people, pretty much insisting that the other person believes it, insisting. And often the aspects of the reality that are being asserted are very subjective and arguable. But sometimes they are pretty much beliefs that don't match easily verifiable facts at all. Another thing I learned was I didn't feel what I felt. Everything I felt was not a valid feeling. I didn't feel anything. Um, that was a lot that a lot of things in that regard in regards to my feelings with my last narcissist were very much like that. If anything I felt was an inconvenience to her, if it wasn't joyful glee and basically yes manning her to death. If I told her I was depressed, she would argue it and say that I'm being difficult and I'm not really depressed and I'm just making a big deal out of nothing. And that's because the narcissistic process, needing to maintain a perfect self-image, will project all negative qualities onto other people, especially their partner. And after enough of these relationships, it becomes possible to know what's happening inside the narcissist, or basically in their world, by listening to their accusations. And it goes to say that projective identification is definitely a factor in the relationship, and that's where the codependent enabler actually starts to take on the projected role. Um, Another thing that I've also learned is that my feelings were abusive, no matter what they were. Again, unless it was happy or unless it was yes, anything you want, baby, my feelings were absolutely abusive. Um, I used to tell my most recent narcissist a lot that, I was always afraid to talk to her about things because I was afraid that she was going to start yelling at me or not take anything I say seriously. And apparently that made me abusive because I was emotionally abusing her by attacking her with my feelings. And, when I try, when I tried to basically tell her, it's kind of healthy to talk about your feelings with your partner, not only was I accused of not being vulnerable, I was accused of letting go feelings that hurt her feelings, and because of that, I'm abusive, and I shouldn't feel that way. That's because to the narcissist, your feelings aren't important. What's important to them is that you're fulfilling the role that they've set to you, and that's it. If you're not fulfilling the role that they want you to have in their life, you ain't shit. They don't care about how you feel. There's no room for your feelings, and in that, unless you're feeling positive emotions such as admiration or love, they don't give a damn. Since the narcissist takes no responsibility for their experience, including feelings, any negative experiences that you have is all your fault and all you're doing. In my last, another thing I learned too is in my last relationship is that, if I was responsible for her violence all the time. Like there was one time she threw a ceramic toothbrush holder at my head and concussed me, and she accused me of pushing her to that point because when we had an argument and she went to lock herself into the bathroom because I did not allow her to lock the door, knowing that she self-harms when she storms off like that and locks in the bathroom. I wanted to make sure she was okay. Apparently that made me the monster because I made her feel cornered, so she went into fight or flight mode and decided that she was gonna basically concuss me. And that's an extreme example of narcissism. The codependent person's mere existence is just justification for their perpetration of violence, and that's an absolute decoupling of action from the assignment of responsibility. I was basically 100% to blame for anything that happened in the relationship. She was very that being said, my last narcissist, she was very adamant about not having anything to do with anything that went wrong in the relationship. She was a total angel, and I was the big monster that ruined her life. And that being said, too, that everything was always about me. And that's just another instance of projection. Everything is actually always about the narcissist, particularly since there's no room in the relationship for the codependent person's reality. The enabler has to basically wrap themselves to fit the needs of the narcissist, and any attempt to assert the self as an independent entity is basically destroyed. And a relationship is doomed to fail under these circumstances. Some relationships last while both people are crushed under the weight of dysfunction, but eventually that kind of system will snap. And many men in relationships with narcissistic women describe the relationships as emasculating. And not only do men in these relationships feel like they're never enough, many times these relationships are pretty much governed by things like materialism, so they give and give to the point of financial and physical ruining. And in the midst of this, you might be expecting something back: intimacy, closeness, emotional connection. And while your ships of narcissistic supply and gifts and stuff sailing into the harbor, nothing ever seems to come back out of it. And aside from the financial struggle where men feel inadequate and emasculated, they're also made to feel less than men for feeling things. If they're tired of being emotionally abused and they say something about it, or verbally abused and they say something about it, or anytime they're just tired of being treated like they're irrelevant for no discernible reason. Well, you're not being man enough. You're too weak. You're too soft. Quit being a little bitch. Stuff like that. But it'll never be enough. Nothing will ever be enough. The ring won't be enough. The neighbors will have a better car. Your job title won't be powerful enough. The vacation won't be posh enough. You won't be in good enough shape. Nothing at all will ever be good enough. And for many years you may have believed that if you gave her the fairy tale, then it'll be fine. So you keep trying to pull the sword out of the stone. The relationship then becomes about the doing rather than the being. And narcissistic relationships are all held in place by the hope of a someday better. Because letting go of hope is scary as hell. I know when I got there in my last relationship, I was a mess. And I came out for the better, but there's still a lot of messes left to clean up from all that. And that's because the tragic fallout of the narcissistic relationship, whether it's with man, woman, whatever, is that it leaves a person doubting himself. Because at the end of my last relationship with my last narc out of the three, I was made out to be the monster. I was the narcissist. I was the one who, didn't give and always took, and that always left me thinking, but what if she's right? What if I'm the one, who's like this? And even though I had so much proof in front of me that showed me that was not the case, I was just still like, well, what if it's me? What if it's me? And self-doubt is a psychological cancer. It takes you over very slowly, and it creeps into all areas of your life. Parenting, career, friendships, day-to-day decision making. And when that self-doubt becomes your new normal, and when you're basically destroying yourself in the process of trying to please an unpleasable partner, that's when you have to start thinking, like I did before I decided to leave for the final time. And that was, do I often feel like I'm not enough? Does she remind me that, she can do better or deserves better? Do you keep trying new strategies to make the relationship work? Do you keep buying her gifts and, trying to make her happy, and none of it does? It just keeps hitting a dead end? Does the relationship feel like you're in a one-way street? Do I feel like an audience, to this show that's basically her life? Does the relationship feel like a disconnected stage set? If there is sex, does it feel obligatory and disconnected for either one of you? Do you look forward to your future with her? These are things you definitely want to ask. And if more than two of them are no, it might be time to, reconsider. You know what I mean? I mean, leaving is not easy, and it may not even be practical. But it has to be a stepwise process, and it always start with communication. We're basically in which you can take responsibility. But you may have already tried these techniques, and even couples therapy. And communication doesn't work when the other person isn't listening. I think that's a big thing that when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, whether it's male or female, you never look at that. You never pay attention to the fact that if they're not listening to anything that you say, there is no communication, and there never will be. Again, within the relationships with all three of my narcissists, all of them harped on communication and how we don't communicate, and communication is terrible, and blah blah blah. But it wasn't because the communication was terrible. It was because we were communicating, but the other person wasn't listening. The other person was just waiting to respond. When the communication is going absolutely nowhere, and you're plagued with self-doubt and feelings of inadequacy, you're depressed, you're distracted, you're anxious, you're letting your health go, you don't look forward to growing old together, or you basically feel like you're talking and your partner's not at all listening, it's really time to reassess the situation. And the reassessment has to be done within a context of considering things like, the children involved, shared assets, shared history, nostalgia, and dashed hopes. It won't be easy, and it's often a gradual process of letting go and taking your life back. But if you do decide to stay, re-rendering your expectations and basically recognizing the desolation of the territory with your narcissistic partner, she's not likely to change. So you have to build your social networks to at least ensure that you have, support and sounding boards. We teach ourselves as men, that we should just do the right thing. But, doing the right thing shouldn't entail basically futile self-sacrifice. Men often don't want to leave, and in fact can be more tenacious than women in holding on. And that's because we treat our relationships like endurance tests, and we basically socialize each other to have broad shoulders. And this isn't about broad shoulders, it's about broad psyches. It's about understanding your narcissistic partner and making decisions accordingly. It's about giving yourself the right to be heard, to be loved, to engage in the reciprocal dance of a loving relationship. The currency of a healthy relationship is respect, kindness, and mutuality. Retain yours, and basically always regard your partner with compassion. It really may be the best medicine of all time.